Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to episode 222 of the Husker Football Fan Program. I'm Mike Harvat.
And I'm Justin Swanson.
It's the first episode of Season 7, which means a fresh start for both us and Frost's team. Today we have a brief discussion about the start of spring practice.
You can find us on the web at huskerpod.com or by searching Husker Football Fan Podcast on Facebook. You can also connect with us on Twitter by following @HuskerPod or email us at huskerpod@gmail.com. This episode is brought to you by Central Nebraska Buffalo. Check out their website for their latest deals. The website is cnbuffalo.com.
We're also brought to you by Monty Rohde with Pinnacle Realty in Lincoln. Looking to buy or sell a home in Lincoln or know somebody who is? Correspond with Monty at 402-770-3356.
And also be sure to stay tuned for our upcoming pledge drive. We can't do this without your support, listeners. Thank you. Today on the Husker Football Fan Program, we have a story in two acts. Act 1, what happens to Frost in springtime? Michael, it's so exciting. Today, we are in the midst of spring practice. It seemed like it took so long to get to this point, but here we are.
Indeed, and it's a very late spring, so that contributes to that sense of waiting that we have for the spring practice. But that's ultimately a good thing in Nebraska. You know, it can be pretty cold in the wintertime, but here we are. The birds have returned. The sun's been shining finally. The snow's largely gone at this point, so they can actually they can practice and get some time outside. So.
Truly, spring's a little bit of a misnomer for when they normally do spring practice, isn't it, Michael? Oh, it's winter normally. So yeah, it's actually spring. And sounds like, I think the biggest talking points lately, as we're hearing from these coaches, are a real emphasis on special teams. Mike Dawson's going to be coordinating that. And he's got some experience doing that in previous coaching stops, and including at the NFL. And he's really passionate about that. He says if you want to make it in the NFL, you better be ready to contribute on special teams. So that's a real point of passion. And several other coaches have commented to that effect. I know Travis Fisher said if you want to be a starting defensive back for the Nebraska Cornhusker football team, you better have a starting role in one of the special teams units. So they're taking it quite seriously.
And Justin, I have to say about time. I know we talk about culture all the time, and it's frustrating, and we're going into year 4 of Scott Frost, and we're still talking about culture, but it seems like they're trying to set a tone early, and I appreciate that.
I mean, Mike, if I'm going to talk culture, I want to talk about Rachmaninoff. I want to talk about Dostoevsky. I don't want to talk about the football team culture. Another interesting point that's come up several times was some concern about the attempted cancellation with the football team from the University of Oklahoma. Some of the sports reporters asked Coach Frost. It was his first time speaking to the press since that whole fiasco, and several reporters asked him about that, and he seemed to dodge the question a little bit. He didn't want to say whose idea it was, and there was a lot of consternation on social media. Husker fans saying, "Why are you asking this question? Husker fans don't care." To which, I respond, frankly, do you know what the media's job is? They're going to ask that question. They have to ask that question. They need to hold power accountable.
And honestly, I'm very surprised that Frost met it head on. I know you say it sounded like he dodged the question, but the fact that was the first question asked, I'd say that his response actually spoke to something that you brought up so eloquently in the last episode, and that is they were exploring all options. Everything was on the table. The reality is that there are a lot of small businesses in Lincoln that would benefit greatly and possibly even, dare we say, survive were an additional game added to the season in terms of home games in Lincoln this year. So there are actual livelihoods at stake here, and that's something that should be seriously considered when they explore their options for what's best for the team, what's best for the city of Lincoln, and what's best for the university.
Well, and Coach Frost really leaned into the wide variety of factors to consider, both to your point, the impact on the city of Lincoln, but also the fact that there's only one home game currently scheduled for the more temperate September and October football months. You want to have more recruiting opportunities, and also you want to have revenue for the athletic department itself, who they've weathered COVID as well as any athletic department, but they are still having quite the shortfall, and there were furloughs and layoffs, and this is a way to try to make up for that. So it sounds like they're still working to see if they can fill that bye date that's still week 1, which was to recover from the trip to Ireland, which unfortunately will not be happening. But we're still playing Illinois in week 0, so there's an open spot, and they're going to try and fill that. So we'll see what happens, and we'll definitely follow up on that reporting as it emerges.
And I'm satisfied to let this be the end of this discussion at this point, honestly. As it pertains to looking forward to this season, it is now decided that Nebraska's playing Oklahoma, and so we can work with that, right?
And so it shall be, Michael. I guess one other point that's worth discussing is much ink has been spilt about the fact that we have a very large football team. These, both in terms of size, 150 plus guys, but in terms of girth and weight and height and heft, these are large young men, large offensive linemen, large running backs, large wide receivers. They're large, especially when you consider some of the talent that's left in the last several years. I'm looking at the wide receiver position. Mr. Spielman, very athletic, very dynamic, not the largest man. Same goes for Wan'Dale Robinson. Extremely dynamic. We're very fond of him here on the podcast. Not a large man. Now you have sizable people across the field. It does sound as though Coach Frost announced early on the Big Ten would adjust to him and the Cornhuskers, it does sound that it would appear Coach Frost is beginning to adjust to the Big Ten, wouldn't you say?
You know what they say. You always have to keep your words sweet because eventually you might have to eat them.
Along those same lines of perhaps Coach Frost adjusting his methodologies to that necessary to compete in the Big Ten, an interesting comment was made by one of the assistant coaches today that though they've always had a strong emphasis on speed in practice, they want to take more time to actually complete the play. That is, spend less time sprinting to get back to the starting blocks, to burst again, to fly anew down the field in search of a touchdown. But instead, they want to complete the play. Get to the end zone, finish the play, complete it. And that way, when you see victory, you experience victory, that's a good thing that hopefully pays dividends down the line, as opposed to running back to the blocks. You're completely exhausted. Now you got to do it again. And you're doing things, perhaps, though you're doing them fast, you are going through the motions. So a little bit of an evolution there from the Chip Kelly method.
Well, as a musician myself, that just brings me back to the adage that you perform the way you practice, right? And so I think that there is a psychological element to that, where if these people are used to performing a certain way in practice, that will translate to the field. So hopefully we'll see that happen this fall.
And with that, we conclude Act 1. Now for Act 2 of our program, the NCAA fought the law and the law won. Michael, today, the NCAA was in court, the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, to argue a case about whether or not they should be compensating their players. Do you know about? Did you? I believe you haven't been following this closely. If I'm not mistaken.
I'll be honest with you. I've been up to my neck in books. I've taken on a side hustle as a book reviewer, and I've just been reading a lot of books because that's what I do.
Have you been pursuing a specific genre?
No, just books, just ones with words in them.
Big words or small words?
Well, one of them was a dictionary, so that was interesting.
Was
or
it
shall
English?
I say, it was enthralling.
Ooh, indeed. Indubitably. Well, some of the Supreme Court justices, many of the Supreme Court justices, had stern comments for the NCAA, and I don't know that the NCAA acquitted themselves as well as they would have liked In fact, one of our friends and colleagues remarked on Twitter that if they were an employee at the NCAA, they might want to be buffing up their LinkedIn page. The implication being things are not going well there. Also, Justice Clarence Thomas, noted Nebraska fan, listed off a series of high-profile football programs. He said Alabama, Ohio State, and Nebraska in his example. To which I say, huzzah! We are a high-profile football program, and don't you forget it.
As it pertains to marketing and profitability, I would say that's accurate.
Well, and that certainly are the issues before the Supreme Court. So, it'll be quite interesting to see what happens.
I do have to say this much. If they bring back the NCAA football video game, which I believe has been announced,
yes.
I may actually take a break from reading all the books that I read all the time.
To play the game?
Did you know that I read books, Justin?
Many.
Yes.
Many books. Well, as this case evolves and as a decision is made, we'll have to reach out to our chief legal affairs correspondent, Dan Lust, and have him back on the show to kind of break down what this means for the Huskers, for the NCAA, for student athletes. As a reminder, we will be launching a pledge drive in the coming months, so stay tuned so that you can support this program.
In the meantime, you can support our sponsors, and that is a wonderful way to support us as well. We were talking earlier about how Nebraska is a hardy and stocky team this year, and one of the ways that you can do that...
Indeed it is.
Yes, and one of the ways that you can do that for yourself, if you want to follow in their footsteps, is to slowly go the way of the buffalo, as it were.
Indeed. But it'll be a lean girth if you do go to that direction, because, of course, buffalo is the healthy alternative.
Yes, lots of protein and none of the guilt.
But all the flavor. That's what we call a win-win-win.
So go to cnbuffalo.com and get yourself some Central Nebraska buffalo.
Also, home buying and selling still is happening at quite a rapid rate these days, and you need to make sure that you're working with someone who knows their way around the neighborhood, so to speak. And that person is Monty Rohde. So be sure and reach out to our friend Monty. He can help you assess your options, understand your opportunities, and he's a friendly man too. Someone that's great to work with. So please contact our dear friend Monty, 402-770-3356.
Or if you're more comfortable in this day and age with communicating with somebody via electronic mail, it's monty.rohde@prglincoln.com.
And as we say to end every edition of the Husker Football Fan Program, go Big Red.
It's Scarlet, Justin. It's a common mistake, but yes, go Big Red.
I am enthused about the Scarlet and Cream. May they win all of their games and lose none.
May it be so.
The Husker Football Fan Podcast is an unofficial, non-commercial podcast. The views expressed on this podcast belong solely to the individuals expressing them. The Husker Football Fan Podcast is not endorsed by or affiliated with the Nebraska Cornhuskers or the University of Nebraska. Not sponsored by MeUndies. Not sponsored by Movement Watches. Not sponsored by Purple Mattresses. If you're a first-time customer, you can go to audible.com and get a free audiobook anyway, so why should we be sponsored by them? Husker Hounds, feel free to call us.